It was about when I was judge. Am I on that thing now? Are you hearing what I'm saying? Anyway, this man George Short that I brought up, he was living over on Mad River, and when I held court most of the time in my own home, or somewhere else, a hood of a pickup or somebody else's place, justice court. But anyway, this man was living there, and George Short was over there across the bridge on Mad River, and he was feeding his dogs, staying with old Carl Rennick, and he was feeding his hounds out in front of the cabin. The road came right by there, and the guy come around there with the pickup, and he was watching George, and he run over George's dog. Well, he run over the dog, and goddamn it upset him. He backed back, and he killed the dog dead in hell, and was the best dog George had. So George, he wouldn't pay George for the dog, so George filed suit against him, and it came into my court, and so anyway, George had been over in our country coyote trapping that summer, and Douglas had been just a little kid. He'd been riding all over the country with him where he set traps, and George set the traps, and Douglas would ride around and look at the traps. But anyway, the day it come to court, George and his wife Betty came, and this man came, and I told George, I says, you know, you're going to have to can't appear to be friends here, because I said I'll decide on whatever the evidence is. I don't need to hear it, anything till the time comes. And so I get in there and I rang the gavel, and we start the court's in session. I realized that Betty, George's wife, she's a witness to this incident, wasn't in there, and I had to go back in the kitchen. She was talking to Carolyn, and I got her in there. And we get about halfway through this thing, and the door opens, in comes Douglas, and he says, well, George, he says, we caught a coyote in our trap, he says, down at the old Gilman place, and I got him the hell out of there, and so we go on, and finally I heard all the testimony. If you'd have been watching, the man, the dogs instead of the man, we wouldn't have run over the dogs. And so, in my mind, he was at fault because he wasn't watching the dogs. So I told him, I asked him, I says, do you have insurance for this deal? Oh yeah, he says, I'm covered by insurance. And I says, well, I says, I've listened to all this testimony, and I believe that if you'd been watching the dogs instead of the man, that you wouldn't have run over this man's dog. And so, I don't know, $300 or $400, whatever the price was, but anyway, and he says, well, okay. I says, I've decided that you owe the man for the dog. And he says, well, that's fine. He says, you know, I'm not really upset over it, but he says, at least, he says, I'll be able to tell the people I've met the Judge Roy Bean at Trinity County. So that was that story.